Hi, Paul Sakis, Good News Broadcast, speaking to Cerridwen Fallingstar. Hi, how are you?
Hey, Paul. I'm great. How about yourself?
Okay, good. We're going to talk about witchcraft, shamanism, and pagan rituals. We have Halloween coming up, and you are an authority on these kinds of things.
Right.
And you're... Well, actually, this is Reverend Paul Sakis, and I'm an interfaith minister and have some spiritual thinking as well. And I grew up in a little town called Tarrytown, and I'm going up there this afternoon where the legend of Sleepy Hollow occurred.
Oh, interesting.
So, Halloween's a big deal. Ichabod Crane, right.
Right.
Who, I was just reading the legend of Sleepy Hollow. There's a whole tale to be told. And so, in the process of that, what led you to be even thinking about witchcraft and shamanism and things like this?
I was working as a reporter for a small feminist newspaper, and my editor came in and said, "Oh, there's a witch on trial for fortune telling."
Okay.
I said, "I'll take that story."
Why? Why did you say you'll take that story?
Well, I had always had lots of past life memories from the time I was a very small child, which included being a witch, and however I thought they were all extinct. I mean, I thought they'd all been killed off by the Inquisition, so I didn't realize you could still be a witch. So the idea that there was someone out there calling themselves a witch in modern times, this was in 1975 in Los Angeles, well, I just had to go check it out. It was just too wild, you know. I needed to see what was going on there.
So it was good news to hear that there might be a witch out there.
Yeah, well, I was pretty excited about it. I was like, wow, all right, you know, there's still people out there, and I wonder if it's anything similar to the little bits and pieces of memories that I've had about it. So.
And was it?
And it was quite, yes.
Okay, and so what are some of those little pieces of memories that you have, and what is your feeling in this regard?
Well, you know, witches are basically the shamans of, you know, the European shamanic traditions. If you think Native American traditions, this would be Native European traditions. So it has to do with the cycles of the seasons, and we have 8 major holidays a year. We're associated with Halloween, but that's just one of our major holidays. The others are, you know, the solstices and the equinoxes, and what we call the cross-quarter days, the days in between solstices and equinoxes. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very natural spiritual tradition that kind of harmonizes people with the rest of the world in which they live, with the plants and the animals and the web of life.
Okay, there it is, the web of life. I like that. What is Halloween? Where did Halloween begin?
Oh, nobody knows where it began exactly.
Okay.
It goes too far back, but Halloween.
Too far back?
Well, yeah, way farther than we have records.
Right.
It's not like we've found anything that says today we invented Halloween. You know?
We don't have the founders.
We don't have the founders' statement.
Sign some parchment that we can all get a copy of.
You know, there's certainly materials indicating that it was practiced, you know, for a very, very long time.
And what was the original practice? Why do we have Halloween today?
Well, it's a Day of the Dead. It's sort of like the Mexican Dia de los Muertos, you know, where people honor the dead, or the Japanese festival of Oban, which they hold in August. Most cultures have a day or a time period in which the dead are said to return from the land of spirit and to visit the people that they have loved. And so the people they have loved put out altars for them. In Mexico, they go to the cemetery and set out the altars in the cemetery.
Really?
In Japan, they float little boats with candles on them down the rivers at the end of the festival, which represents the spirits going back home to the land of spirit.
Really?
So there's there's different practices that you would do. We will, at my rituals, will have altars, and will, at a certain point, people will light a candle for each of their dead. They may have photographs of those people on the altars, and they'll say a little something about the person who's passed on, and remember them and honor them in that way.
Interesting. Then we bob for apples and we ask for candy?
Well, you know, those are actually both pretty old traditional activities. The Celts believed that their land that was heaven, we would call heaven, they called the Isle of Apples. It was an island somewhere in the west over the ocean, where there were constantly apples and trees in blossom as well. And so bobbing for apples was essentially trying to achieve your own immortality, trying to grab the apples from the water. It's an old, so it is actually a very old tradition.
Wow,
that has a spiritual significance. And then the door-to-door thing also was something that happened in Europe. The young people would go door to door asking for treats, and the older people would, be cooking things for them and offer them food and drink, and then they would go on their way to the next house.
Wow. Were you around then? What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think I had. My first book is called The Heart of the Fire, and it's a past life novel. It's set in 16th century Scotland, sort of about witches at that time and the witch hunts. So that is one of the past lives that I remember having. And then the one that's just come out now, White as Bone, Red as Blood, The Fox Sorceress, is set in 12th century Japan, and it's also based on a past life that I've had. It's sort of a Memoirs of a Geisha meets Shogun kind of a thing.
Okay. What makes a witchcraft? Or what is Wicca? What's Wicca?
Wicca, the word comes from the same root word as willow. If you think about wicker furniture, Wicca. And the willow, it moves with the wind. It's very flexible. It goes with the flow of life. So it's sort of like the Tao. The Chinese concept of things moving with the flow.
Okay.
So the witch or the Wiccan is one who moves with the flow of natural energy instead of trying to resist it.
Interesting. And an aspirin is created from the willow tree.
Yes. It's also a very potent.
Isn't that amazing?
Potent herb. Well, it's not an herb really, but yeah, its bark has been used for thousands of years.
As a real, if not one of the greatest inventions of medicine, right?
That's very true. That's very true.
The common aspirin. Unbelievable. Great for the heart. And from a willow tree. So, geez, maybe all these things are, well, I kind of think with me, myself, and I think that all this is all, that's my cousin, that aspirin. So I kind of think that we're all connected. Do you think we're all connected? You started off talking about the animals and the plants.
The web of life, yeah. Well, clearly we are, and this is something that science is now very clear on, too.
Yay!
You can't jangle one side of the web without having reverberations right on down the line, and unfortunately humans have been sort of jangling the web in a very unconscious manner, and we're starting to see, some nasty little effects like climate change and species extinction and various health problems for ourselves. So it's time to kind of wake up again and realize that we aren't just the lords and masters of creation, that we're really, a part of the whole, and that we need to reestablish harmony. That's the work of the shaman and traditional cultures, is to reestablish harmony between the worlds. And
the discovery of DNA, that tree does have similar DNA as us human beings. Yeah, exactly. Good news. Remarkably similar. Good news. We love it. I think it's in our lifetime, one of the greatest, in our lifetime, one of the greatest discoveries, right? And where that's going to go will be, it should be pretty, phenomenal. Yeah. It's very. I was just fascinated to hear that they've done this DNA testing that shows that human beings are more, you can take two tribes of chimpanzees in Africa who live next to each other, and their DNA is more different than any two humans anywhere on the planet is from each other. It's like there's very little variation in human DNA. So that, I think, is just really amazing how we've invented all these differences with which to have wars and problems, and there's just no basis for it. You and I are very much on the same page. We're brothers and sisters. How is it similar to Shinto? Okay, Shinto, because you did mention you have a new book and it's going to be coming out. Right, and you're going to understand. Yes, the new book is out, and it describes some of the background of the book. Is the Shinto religion, which is still practiced in Japan today, and that is their native pagan tradition. Is the Japanese call it kami no machi, but it is known as Shinto here in the West, and which means the way of spirit. It means pretty much the same thing, and that is it's very, very similar. The beliefs and some of the practices are indeed quite similar to what happened in Europe. The big difference is, of course, that when Buddhism came to Japan, it didn't compete with Shinto or seek to displace it. It coexisted with it. So that even today, virtually all Japanese people practice both Buddhism and Shinto, and they don't see a conflict between those two things. Interesting. Now, in a Japanese person's home, they have usually a Shinto shrine.
Many times, especially the young people are going back to it. There was sort of a movement away from the spiritual after World War II, but many people are now returning more to their roots. And so many people do have, little shrines within the home. There are shrines all over Japan. I mean, there's tens of thousands, at least 10 or 20,000 shrines. Throughout Japan. I think there's more, maybe more like 60. They can be very small little neighborhood shrines, or they can be big shrines like the Inari shrine, where some activities take place in my book, because that particular shrine has been around since about 700 A.D. So that's a very big shrine in which, and you still today, I mean, she's a goddess of abundance. Inari is, the goddess of abundance and sorcery and love. She has quite a large rubric of things that she does, and today you'll go there and you see businessmen coming in getting their endeavors blessed by priests and priestesses in traditional garb.
Endeavors blessed, what does that mean?
Well, for instance, they don't want to start a project without the blessings of Inari. They go and have the priests and priestesses purify them and, give them their blessings on this business venture that they're about to launch.
Is Inari in certain location or in certain locations?
She'd be all over Japan. There are shrines, I would say about a fourth of the shrines in Japan are dedicated to Inari, so she is a primary deity. People here are more familiar with Amaterasu, the sun goddess, who is, the primary deity in the Japanese pantheon, but the one that they believe that their imperial line, that the emperors are descended directly from the sun goddess.
Do witches cast spells? I'm sorry, unless you want to say something more about the shrines. Do witches cast spells? And what is a spell?
A spell is basically an active form of prayer. So, for a witch to put together a spell, it's a way of. We don't do. I don't do any magic that involves trying to manipulate other people. We don't do there are witches who do manipulative magic. I would stay away from them. But that would be sort of the equivalent of, say, sometimes when Christians are out there, praying for gays to die or something like that. I would consider that a form of black magic, a very negative way of using the power of prayer, a very negative way. And I tend to think that people who do that, regardless of what they call themselves, are people who haven't gotten very far in their spiritual evolution. That, what magic should be is, it's really the art of changing consciousness at will. So it's whatever you do to shift your own consciousness. And the idea is that if you shift your own consciousness, then the world is going to shift in relationship to you. So, for instance, if you wanted love in your life, you would do a spell on yourself to attract the best possible love to you. You wouldn't do a spell on that attractive person over there that you're sure is the one.
I love how you speak and how you think. You put a beautiful thought to even the spell. You make a spell a prayer, and it's not the norm. people. Well, it's because you live this, you are this, you are what you speak, and a believer, and I am as well. But it's when people, if we would take, I think, in just a general market and walked up the street, went to Times Square, and we asked, 10 people what a spell is, we would get bad news.
Well, yes, of course. But that's, we sometimes argue amongst ourselves, which hurt us more, Hollywood or the Inquisition? So, let's face it, a lot of people have been giving us bad press for a while.
It's very true, even the Wizard of Oz, I don't know.
well, that was pretty bad, actually. Well, then it was like the good witch and the bad witch, which
right.
Still is locked into people's mind. People say, "Oh, you're a good witch or a bad witch," and I'll say, "Are you a good Jew or a bad Jew?"
There you go.
Are you a good Christian or a bad Christian?
That's it.
People aren't really come in those two flavors per se.
Mm-hmm.
And So.
Where's the word witch? What does witch mean? What is the word?
The word witch, again, it comes from the root word for willow.
Okay.
So it simply means someone who follows, the path of the willow or the path of Wicca.
Okay.
It's a pretty simple thing. Although
And is Wiccan the religion?
Wiccan is
would
more
you
the
say?
proper term. Wicca, Wicca, is more the proper term, and then a Wiccan would be the practitioner. But witch has been in use for a long time, and it's been used pejoratively, but I think it's important for us to reclaim it in the same way that, when black people started owning the word black and making it a powerful designation instead of an oppressive one, or when, lesbians call themselves dykes, That's a word that they can use to say, hey, I'm owning this, you can't use that to hurt me. This is now a word of power. And it's so words are very powerful, and
that's very true.
Those words is very very important.
That's true, and everybody has their own interpretation of them.
Well, of course. That's one of the interesting things about life, isn't it?
And communication. I know when I went for my little master's thing, they said, there really isn't any communications until, I guess, two people kind of get on sort of a little bit of the similar path of what you're saying and what your other person is listening, right?
Right.
Before there's any really some communications of what's being said, because in essence, I guess you'll think about whatever I say in the way that you can only think about it, right? You're only...
Right. Yes, people are always misinterpreting each other, and that's why one of the things that makes human relationships so fascinating is trying to develop a common language, which you think you have, and then you find out you don't.
And I sort of kind of think it's more in the sense of when people are communicating or feeling comfortable in a communication situation with somebody, I think it's more of it's the bigger picture than the words themselves. It's sort of like the feelings that go around. It's not just the one little word. Like when you say prayer and you bring that into a conversation, I feel a lot of different things of friendliness and of closeness. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of interesting.
And yet other people might be really horrified by that same.
Somebody would run away from me. I know. Such is life, right? But it's all about good things. So,
like for instance, if I stopped burning frankincense incense at rituals because for too many recovering Catholics, it brought up bad memories of church. They needed to have some different smell. That smell had too many associations. So.
Okay, sage. When you go to the sage.
Right. Do something that doesn't have all the associations.
So now what are you going to do on Halloween the 30th? Can you come to we're having a big party here in New York. And I think I mentioned to you before we started recording, I'm going up to Tarrytown, my little town, Legend of Sleepy Hollow town. And how about yourself? What will you do on Halloween? Or what do you usually do?
I'm going to have a relatively small private ritual this year. Some years I've had really big public rituals. But this year I've got the book out and really I'm putting all my energy to promoting that, so I don't have the energy for a big public ritual, but I'll have a few people over, probably 30 or 40. And we will set up an altar. People will put pictures of, their beloved dead, and we'll cast a circle. That's kind of what we create sacred space by invoking the four elements and the energies of the goddess and the god. We believe in that the divine is both feminine and masculine, so we'll call in those aspects. And then people will go on a trance journey to the Isle of Apples, to the land of the dead, to talk with their dead. They'll have one or more spirits of people who have passed come and chat with them while they're in that trance space. That's always very powerful. When people come back from that, we'll light the candles on the altar. People have a chance to talk a little bit about anyone who's passed in the past year, and just also to honor, the people that are very, very dear to them who've already crossed over. And then we will have a feast afterwards where we'll share some food and drink, and that's basically the essence of the ritual. Very interesting.
Well, I venture to say that 90% of people, when they think about Halloween, don't think about anything regarding dead. Or maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's a kind of, I think people pretty much just think of it as a, candy and kids going wild on sugar, I think is most people think about, or what kind of costume am I going to wear. But again, the costume thing also goes way back, because people would, at that time, put on costumes in order to frighten away any negative spirits, or to confuse the negative spirits. So there was, a belief that, well, our friendly spirits could come back, but there could also be some we don't want. And so people would put on costumes in order to try and frighten or intimidate anything that shouldn't be there.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, you're an interesting person. Where are you from originally?
I'm from Southern California originally.
Okay, there's a good place to be from and to be at. So, and you're still there in that way?
No, I'm in Northern California now. I live up in Marin County, just north of San Francisco.
Oh, okay, that's a great spot as well.
Yeah, much more. I'm out in the country. I'm a country witch now instead of a city witch.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, it's all good. So, well, thank you very much. It's very interesting. I mean, one last question is, so what is good news for you?
Well, the Harry Potter books I think have been really great for us. I think that's really open. I think this whole next generation that's coming up is not going to be scared of witches at all. They're going to realize, even though the Harry Potter books are fiction and much of what they portray is fictional, I think it's just created a lot of very warm feelings among young people about magic and about kind of a different worldview, and seeing witches and wizards as people like themselves. I think that's been really great for us.
All right, sounds super. Okay, thank you very much for sharing, and it's a pleasure and honor to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Paul. This was fun.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.